Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Let's start our video with a story in which our OP saved a lot of money for the bank where he worked. The sad part of the story is that he didn't get any reward for it. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. How I saved Bank of America $59,000. Back in the 90s, I worked as a floating teller at 2 different banks. I'd travel from branch to branch and cover staffing shortages. Between the 2 banks, I worked at about 40 different branches over a 5-year span. My responsibilities depended on who was out that day. At this particular branch, on a Friday many years ago, I was a head teller and controlled the vault. Before we opened, other tellers bought money from me to keep in their drawers. This being a payday, there was a lot of money changing hands. I handed out at least $100K. Today, banks are smarter and restrict tellers to about $2K, but back then it was the Wild West. I was working the drive-thru, so I'm facing away from the lobby. The front door's open and I'm cashing checks and making deposits, quickly opening and closing the pneumatic tubes leading to each drive-thru lane. About 20 minutes in, one of the customer service bankers appears at my elbow and says we're being robbed. The bandit says he has a bomb and he wants all our money in the bag she's holding. I empty my top drawer, making sure to pull the emergency cash that triggers an alarm. I then stand there and smile at all the customers who are waiting for their transactions that will never be completed. Since the robber silently passed his note to the banker, none of the customers in the lobby know what's happening. A minute passes, the customer service banker comes back. He wants the strapped money. In other words, the money I had pulled out to cover a busy Friday rush. My main drawer's on the front teller line, so I turn around and get a quick glance at the guy with a fake mustache and sunglasses wearing a shabby suit and holding a briefcase in the lobby. I reach down and look at about $60K of various denominations and colorful currency straps sitting in front of me and promptly grab a heavy $1,000 brick of ones straight from the Fed wrapped in thick plastic. The consumer banker gives the bag to the bandit and he leaves. We immediately lock the doors and spend the next 3 hours talking to police. Everyone else gave them all their straps, tens of thousands of dollars. I gave him 1,000 ones. To be clear, what I did was wrong. I made a value judgment based on the info I had and my own stupid 23-year-old pride. I saved Bank of America $59K, but the bank doesn't care. Still, I get a ridiculous amount of pleasure imagining this guy excitedly cutting through the thick plastic and discovering he now has 1,000 ones so crisp they might as well be 1,000 paper cuts. This was the 90s. $60K would get you 2 top-of-the-line Eddie Bauer Ford Explorers or 3 RAV4s. And our next story. Parents told my brother that he could take my house. I'm a single man in my early 30s, and my younger brother, who's 29, already has 4 children. Our relationship has been strained over the years, mainly due to my sister-in-law's behavior. She constantly tries to provoke me, acting superior and playing the victim when I respond. Despite knowing her true nature, my parents and brother adore her. Financially, they're dependent on my brother's income as sister-in-law refuses to work, even though she has a college degree. They currently live in my parents' house, a 3-bedroom home built in the 60s, which creates privacy issues with so many people under one roof. During our childhood, my brother was the favored one, and any retaliation on my part against his actions resulted in punishment. Our parents realized the inequality in treatment when other family members called them out on it. In an attempt to hide the situation, they decided to move us away, approximately 150 miles from our relatives. This way, our interactions were limited to holidays, as the 3-hour drive made regular visits impractical. While this change brought some semblance of equality, my brother's behavior only worsened. He became physically abusive towards me on multiple occasions and interfered in my relationships, even flirting with my first girlfriend until she broke up with me. My parents dismissed my concerns and encouraged me to endure the mistreatment. The only time I received equal treatment was when they wanted to maintain appearances in front of other people. Once I turned 18, I left home, not even finished with high school yet, but couch surfing was a preferable option to living with them. From that point on, I maintained low contact with my family, and they didn't even attend my high school graduation, which didn't bother me. The start of the 2020 pandemic proved challenging for me. I lost my job, and since my roommate also became unemployed, we couldn't renew the lease on our expensive condo. Desperate to downsize, I made the decision to purchase a camper. I found a reasonably priced one for $1,000 and placed it on my truck, intending to live in it temporarily. However, I made the mistake of asking my parents if I could park the camper at their house where my brother and his family still resided. To my surprise, they refused, insisting that I pay them an exorbitant amount equivalent to renting an apartment in my area. This was financially unfeasible for me since I was unemployed and trying to save as much of my unemployment money as possible. They even went as far as calling my camper an eyesore and suggesting I find an alternative. Sister-in-law found the situation amusing and joined my brother in mocking my living arrangements, referring to me as a homeless bum. On the first night, with no place to go, I parked my truck and camper in a store parking lot. Feeling anxious about potential break-ins, sleep eluded me that night, and finding a stable place to park became an arduous task. Over the months, I encountered various challenges, including encounters with beggars and addicts, as well as being asked to leave certain areas due to the perceived unsightliness of my camper. At one point, a person claiming to be from an HOA demanded that I move, despite not being parked in a residential area. To avoid unnecessary trouble, I relocated my camper, often relying on long extension cords to tap into available electricity sources and keep my refrigerator running. It was a makeshift solution, but it helped maintain some sense of normalcy. I used public bathrooms whenever possible, occasionally relying on the kindness of friends and local gyms to access showers. Summers were particularly uncomfortable without air conditioning in the camper, so I purchased a used portable air conditioner to make the living conditions more bearable. After months of living a nomadic life, I finally secured a new job. However, since I didn't have a stable place to live, I continued living in the back lot of the company building where I worked. My boss appreciated my dedication and the fact that I was readily available to take any shifts, so he allowed me to park my camper in one of the employee spaces. This arrangement saved me from dealing with trespassers, and my boss even permitted me to plug into the building for power and water. In return, I occasionally worked for free on Sundays when the office was empty, helping with janitorial duties. Although winters were relatively comfortable with a small electric heater, summers remained challenging due to the lack of air conditioning. As time passed, I accumulated savings and eventually landed a better position as a supervisor within the company, earning a higher salary than my previous job. This newfound stability made me consider investing in a permanent home. Recognizing the vulnerability of renting, I began searching for a house close to my workplace. Fortunately, I stumbled upon a 3-bedroom manufactured home on a small property just 2 miles away. I managed to negotiate a $10,000 reduction from the asking price, using most of my savings for the down payment and securing a home loan. Finally, I bid farewell to the camper life and settled into my new house, finding a place in the backyard to store the camper in case I needed it in the future. Unfortunately, my happiness was short-lived. After I shared my excitement about my new home on social media, my family somehow discovered my address and showed up unannounced, expecting a tour. They barged into my house without invitation, making themselves at home. They commented on the excess space I had, emphasizing that as a single person, I didn't need it all. Their intrusive behavior raised red flags, and I realized they had planned this visit. Amidst the chaos, my brother pulled me aside to discuss something privately, and the rest of the family left the room, crowding into the front porch. I instantly understood that they had conspired against me. My brother, whom I'll refer to as Dan, began suggesting that he and his family move into my house, citing the proximity to his workplace. He assumed that since I had the camper, I could live in it while they occupied the main house. Shocked by his audacity, I firmly refused, emphasizing that I bought the house for myself and had no obligation to accommodate his growing family. What struck me was the fact that he never once mentioned the possibility of paying rent. Instead, he began outlining new rules and curfews, stating that I couldn't enter without prior notice. It was a preposterous proposition, and I realized that Dan had long lost touch with reality due to the way our parents had treated him, always placing him at the center of their world. I attempted to voice my objections, but he talked over me, dismissing my opinions. Frustrated, I grabbed my phone and started recording the conversation, holding it in plain sight. Despite that, Dan remained oblivious, continuing to make demands and extending his hand for a handshake as if the deal was already done. That's when I mustered the courage to firmly say, "Hell no." The force in my voice caught him off guard, and he stumbled backward momentarily. Rarely had I raised my voice to him due to the punishment meted out by our parents whenever I did, but this was my house, and here my spine could shine brightly. I stood tall and made it clear to Dan that my house was not up for grabs. I reminded him that I had worked hard to purchase the property and that I deserved it. He grew visibly agitated, getting as close to me as possible without physical contact, and proclaimed that I didn't deserve the house. He argued that his family should be prioritized and that our parents had already determined that I would comply with their wishes. I couldn't help but laugh in his face, asserting that their word was not law and they had no power to give my house to him. The situation escalated further as my parents and sister-in-law stormed back into the room, surrounding me in an attempt to pressure me into agreement. A tumultuous fight ensued, with a repeated line of "just do it for Dan" echoing throughout. I held my ground, emphasizing that they had no say in my life or my house. Threatening to call the police, I brandished my phone, which had recorded their behavior. I warned sister-in-law that any further attempts to harm me would result in assault charges. She screamed in anger, threatening to scratch my eyes out. But my brother held her back. With the evidence on my phone, I made it clear that I wouldn't hesitate to press charges. Finally, my parents reluctantly decided to leave, with my mother giving me a week to reconsider. I firmly rejected their demands, telling them not to come back. As they departed, I reiterated to sister-in-law that her actions had been recorded, serving as a reminder that I wouldn't tolerate any further aggression. The aftermath of the encounter left me with mixed emotions. On one hand, I felt a sense of victory and relief for standing up for myself and protecting my boundaries. On the other hand, the family dynamics had been further strained and tensions lingered. It was a harsh reminder that even blood ties couldn't guarantee harmony and respect. However, I was determined to maintain my independence and protect my newfound stability. My house was my sanctuary, a place where I could live on my terms. Free. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.